Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Barbara, and I'm talking to you today from Malacca Manipal Medical College. It has been a rather difficult time for everyone as we fight this pandemic of COVID-19, and it is particularly frightening if you are in the medical profession. Now, for our young men and women joining us today at the cusp of your career decision making, thinking about a career in medicine, um, I'm only going to assume that many questions are going through your mind, as with your parents. Well, we hope that by tuning in today with our guest speaker, Professor Nachiappan from Malacca Manipal Medical College, we'll be able to help you clear some of those fog, doubts, and perhaps put a little bit of perspective in there. What we aim to do with you today is to explore on how medicine is going to emerge as a strong and viable career choice, especially in the months to come. We will come out of these challenging time post the COVID pandemic. Okay. Before we proceed, I would like to encourage everybody to please mute your microphones and turn your camera off. We will be taking questions. There is a chat feature available. Please type your questions in the chat box so that we are able to pick it up as we go along. Today, we will be having an interview session with Professor Dr. M. Nachiappan, Director of Clinical Studies and Student Affairs, as well as Head of Department of Surgery, Malacca Manipal. And then we'll share a bit about Malacca Manipal and our MBBS program, the application process, and we'll take questions and answers as well. So Professor Nachiappan is a familiar face if you've been to any of our talks in the past. His current position is Director of Clinical Studies and Head of Surgery at the Faculty of Medicine. He is also a seasonal consultant neurosurgeon at Malacca General Hospital. He's been a practitioner for over 40 years, as well as lecturing. And he formerly held the position of past chairman, Malaysian Medical Association Malacca branch. Welcome, Prof. Nachi.
Well, thank you.
How are you?
Oh, I'm fine, Barbara.
Must have been very busy because I believe classes are ongoing for the medical students at Malacca Manipal.
Exactly. If busier than before, since we have to prepare lessons and prepare projects for them, and then you have to upload, and then we have through Microsoft Teams or Zoom or some other platform, we have face-to-face teaching learning sessions, and we have to mark the assignment projects which were given and so on. And they're actually students are enjoying a lot. Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, Prof. Nachi, you've been in the field of being a medical professional for over 40 years now. Have you seen anything like what we are seeing now before?
No, definitely not in this scale. We have always had infective diseases all through. So we have gone through malaria, so we had tuberculosis, we've gone through dengue and seasonal influenzas, typhoid, and all those things. But never on this scale and in this massive number. This is the first time. It's a very
Right.
unprecedented, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, for COVID's just not impacted people from a healthcare perspective. But with lockdowns and businesses being forced to change and things like that, practitioners of medicine are also impacted, right? Now,
Right.
in your opinion, how can doctors reposition themselves, in the new normal? Because definitely, as we come out of this pandemic, the world would change, and it will be a new normal that we are looking at. So, how can doctors reposition themselves?
Okay, the very good question. The both the private practitioners, whether be it the general practitioners or doctors in the hospitals, consultants and specialists, what has happened is the the volume of work is reduced in these instances because of few factors which are not going to be there all the time. One of the main factors is a movement control order, and a lot of clinics, what happened, they only open for a short while, and by order, okay, they're not supposed to open 24-hour clinics, operating only for a shorter period and so on. And some of the older clinics were where the patients, so the doctors are much older, 65, 70 and so on, they did not want to take a risk of going, okay, because they don't do very well when they get COVID. So they, in fact, close their clinics. And the next thing is that the clinics don't function only by the doctors. They have assistants and nurses and so on who may not want to come. They want to take care of their children who are not going to school anymore, and they stay back. The next thing is, none of the clinics were actually prepared to all the personal protective equipment that we have. And we all know, even the government had a problem in procuring the personal protective equipment, from masks to gloves to gowns and so on. And of course, now they're becoming available. So all these reasons, the general practice actually suffered. And if we are talking about private hospitals, what has happened is that people had postponed the elective surgeries, because if we had elective surgery, most likely they're not going to allow your relatives, uncles, and aunties or to visit you. There's a lot of control orders. They said, why do it now? We postpone it. So a lot of things are postponed and so on. And now what is happening is that new SOPs, standard operative procedures in all hospitals and clinics have come out, and the people are equipping themselves and so on. And what is going to happen is, they should learn, even to take a swab test for a COVID, there is a procedure which has to be learned, and a lot of doctors are learning this, okay, how to do it, how to take the swab and put it in a package, how to send it to the laboratory for testing. These things all, since it's very novel, that's called novel coronavirus, is a new, they are learning that. And I know for my colleagues and friends who are in the private, they have if an individual standalone practice, they've got to their PPEs all ready and so on. And at the same time, the patients have become very health conscious now. Okay, they said, okay, if I have diabetes, I better have a good control. Otherwise, if I get, in case I'm afflicted with the COVID, maybe I won't do very well. Okay, so they wanted to have a control. They wanted to see the doctors. Hypertension, they want to have a control. People have become health conscious in the sense that they want to reduce weight. They don't want to have be obese and so on. And because they are becoming health conscious, they are going to seek out for doctors to make sure that their ailments are all under control, like diabetes and hypertension and whatnot. And I think the doctors will position themselves when they have a protocol in their clinics. Like what happens, every patient who comes into the clinic has to be screened by somebody, a doctor's assistant, whether for temperature or whether you got a respiratory symptoms and so on. And the clinic must have a separate area, isolated area, where these patients who have got such suspected respiratory symptoms or fever could be examined. They don't sit with the rest of the patients and so on. And they have to apply quite a number of new methods of social distancing, sanitization of equipments, and so on and so forth. And actually, the list is endless, but they're all equipping themselves with the knowledge and with the resources to cope up with this.
So doctors basically, the first thing is they have to be very much in touch with what the recommended guidelines should be, and make sure that they follow those and the standards that they are setting is in the best interest of their patients who would be coming to see them.
Exactly, because it is in the interest of both the doctors. If they don't follow, they are going to get it, and their staff as well as the patients. So the doctors are taking a lot of interest and effort to learn up these things, and I think they will prevail because they're going to be a renewed demand for the doctors, as I said just now. They're going to be a rebound of patients coming to see them, although it's slowed down now.
Okay. Now, you know, in terms of the skill sets, right? What skills would be needed for a budding doctor to develop to ensure that they can deliver top-notch services in times to come? Like, while people will continue to fall sick from a variety of ailments and such, but if they are in a field of practice which is very niche or very it deals with a lot of electives, what kind of skills should they be looking at, especially if they are thinking of doing an MBBS or already in their MBBS?
Okay, I think in the future doctors, the practice is going to be very different because in the last decade, with a lot of development in the IT sector, we have, and with AI, artificial intelligence coming into play, we have even the schools, medical schools, adopting a lot of online platform learning, not just because of the COVID. Even before COVID, like Malacca Manipal, they had what you call a blended learning. Blended learning means we have a classroom sessions, which is combined with video recordings of what are the new developments which are taking place in the treatment modalities all around the world, and we show them the video recordings and the procedures and what all is happening there, and while they're sitting in the classroom itself, okay,
Right.
and then we will discuss with them about the case and the procedures and so on. What is going to happen is that yeah, even the Malacca Manipal, we are getting a lot of equipping ourselves with the virtual reality type of learning, augmented learning, and so on and so forth. This is only for on the education, because if you are not be able to adapt to the rapidly changing technology, then we become obsolete. So what happened? We have to be always in the forefront because the learning is becoming a bit different, and the practice is also becoming different. We will find a lot of robots doing menial work, like what happens, sanitization of the hospitals are being robotized, certain procedures are robotized. People like what we wore, I think many of us are now wearing fit watches. People running the watch will tell you what's your pulse rate, and what is the blood pressure and so on. So we have they have developed a lot of quite cheap kind of watches, which are wearable devices, which will record your temperature, which will record your oxygen saturation in the body. It will record even the blood pressure and blood sugar levels and so on and so forth. And you'll find that this is relayed to your doctor. Okay, what happens for the last 1 week? What was your sugar control, for example? What was the blood pressure control? Last 1 month, what it was. So what happened? It will directly go to your physician's records. Okay, and he knows exactly what is happening to you, and he can able to advise. Suppose they find your heartbeat was irregular, okay, and quickly they will contact you, because the system in the doctor's office will capture some irregularity, will alert the doctor to contact the patient and so on. So this is on a sort of a general practice level. And if we find that surgery level is lot of robotic surgeries are happening. In fact, when I started my practice, that we had a rudimentary robotic surgery. We call it stereotactic brain surgery and spine surgery. Now it has become very advanced. And what happens? You can in fact operate on a patient sitting in the next room or another country. Okay, he can have a control and so on. And lot of things, surgeries, incisions in the incision they're making very small, and they're using scopes to do surgeries, and the controls very different. They got no touch techniques of doing surgeries and so on. And the um, the list is endless. A lot of things are happening. Holograph technology has come, and which means as you're operating, what is happening in the organ by through hologram, what the CT scan or the MRI scan, the pictures can be superimposed on the patient itself. Okay. So they can carry on. So a list is actually endless. A lot of technological advances which you tend to adapt.
Okay. But having said that, I mean, while automation, robots, and all can make life easier for a physician, would it also be correct to say that all the more it is important for a medical student's base knowledge, the core knowledge and skills to be very, very strong, as opposed to saying, oh, I
Exactly.
don't need to go into so deep, the
Yes.
robot's going to do it for me.
Yeah. All these technological marvels are applications based on your knowledge. If you don't have a knowledge, you cannot apply any of those. Okay. So basically, the fundamentals of diagnosis, examination, diagnosis, and what needs to be done is the basic core knowledge. It has to be there very strong. If the core knowledge is not strong, whatever type of technological advancement, it's no use to you because you do not know how to apply them, because you do not have a core knowledge. I think that's very important. That's number one. Number two, we should not be dissociated with the patient. Okay, a doctor's touch heals a lot of things. That means a patient wants to talk to a machine, but to a doctor who will have listening ear, and his patient should be able to be very freely ask whatever doubts that he have, and the doctor must have the attitude to be able to have patience and answer whatever the questions and so on, which gives the patients a lot of confidence. So whatever the technological marvel that you have, they all aids only. They are helpful in doing a lot of things, but the basic fundamentals of patient engagement and basic knowledge of anatomy, physiology, and clinical knowledge how to treat the patient has to be always there.
Okay. All right. Now, Prof, one
Yeah.
other thing I think that has come up very apparently in this pandemic is specialist doctors, specialist practitioners. Am I right to say that?
Yes. Yes.
Right? Because in this pandemic situation, you're talking about respiratory specialists, ICU or acute critical care specialists, infectious disease specialists, and things like that.
Yes.
So could you talk a bit about specializing, for a student who is thinking of going into MBBS? How far ahead should they be planning? I mean, they are just embarking. Should they have clarity on what specializing? Should they keep themselves open? How should their fact finding journey be, and things like that?
Okay, this COVID-19 outbreak has unmasked the inadequacy in the numbers of doctors and health personnel. None of the countries, whether it was in Spain or Italy or United States or UK or in Malaysia, we suddenly found that there was a call telling all private practitioners, can you volunteer to come and work? Okay, they found that we had not enough doctors. So there was a perception pre-COVID that we had doctors are waiting for a job. They don't have the post to join in and so on. But what has happened? This is unmasked that it is not so. It was artificially did not have enough posts because we did not build enough hospitals and so on and so forth. That's number one. Number two, the practice of medicine over time is always towards specialization. Okay, from day one, you should cultivate an interest on a subject for which you are going to specialize. Okay, there are specialities where there's a constant and close contact with the patient, like physicians and so on, and people who like to hold a knife and cut and things like that, they become surgeons, and so on and so forth. So first of all, there are so many medical specialists as well as surgical specialties. There was a time, for example, not even 4 or 5 decades back, okay, we had surgeon means that specialist will also mend bones, fracture of the bones and so on. We didn't have orthopedic as a separate specialty. So general surgeons were operating for brain, the spine, the abdomen, okay, and orthopedic surgeries, all were one in one. So what happened was orthopedics came separate specialty, and general surgery became another specialty. Now under general, there are very few general surgeons now. People became hepatobiliary surgeon, which means they only concentrate on liver, gallbladder, and so on. And uh, and what do you call that? Even colorectal surgeon, intestine, even the intestines. Okay, in your abdomen, you got large intestine and small intestines, stomach and small intestine. So people have upper gastrointestinal surgeons, lower gastrointestinal is a colorectal surgeons, and so on. And so many specialty chest surgeons, okay, chest surgeons who only do surgeries in the thorax. Okay, you got cardiothoracic surgeons, and so on. So what happened, even in the surgical field in our body, there are about 15, 16 different specialties, and they're becoming still more minute specialties within that. Like we have got now in Malaysia, there are 4 obesity surgeons. Okay, they only do for obese persons. Okay, they will do stomach stapling and things like that. And this becomes a specialty. Orthopedic surgeons, they become more specialized. Like knee surgeons, they only do knee operations. They can do spine surgeons, only do spine surgeries, and shoulder surgeons, and hand surgeons. You can get an accident and you got your thumb cut off. No orthopedic surgeon, you must go to hand surgeon. Okay, it's like that. There are so many specialties there. So if you are not a specialist in something, then I don't think that you could survive in another 5 to 10 years time. So we should always embark on taking up some specialty, and we should know that we are in every specialty we are very short. Even pre-COVID, we knew that we are very short in every specialty. It's only the houseman post, because they were limited, they had difficulty in getting in. But specialists, we had always had very few, and we all always look. And there are new specialties have come in with a lot of works on genetics. We have a genetics as a specialty. We have got on immune knowledge has developed, and you got now immunologists and so on. So
Right.
so many different fields, and it's endless. There are hundreds and hundreds of different subspecialties, and some of the subspecialties we do not have a single specialist in Malaysia. So there is a vast scope. Okay, if and you have to um, embark on specialization. You have to think about specialization even from as you start your MBBS career.
Okay, Prof, can I just ask your guidance? Like in Malaysia, if a student is a Malaysian and has done their MBBS in Malaysia, um, do they have to be in the government system after they complete their housemanship in order to have a shot at starting their specialization studies?
Okay, about 2 to 3 decades back, there were no specialty programs in Malaysia. So every specialist have to go elsewhere. Either and the popular destination where they go to specialize is either UK or USA. Okay, and what has happened is that about 3 decades back, the DG of the then DG, we have met that time. I was in the University of Malaya. We all had a meeting and says we should have our own program to develop specialists, and we started what we called a master's program. So to start a master's program in any specialty, you should have supporting specialties in the hospital. Okay, suppose you got a surgeon, you must have anesthetist. Okay, you must have, in case you're doing a surgery, he has a heart attack, you must have a cardiothoracic surgeon as well. You must have a cardiologist as well. And in case you develop the infection, you must have infectious specialist as well. So you cannot simply start a specialty career in any hospital, only designated hospital. And we found that we only had about less than 10 hospitals at that time where you have enough specialties to start a specialist program. And again, to start a program, say suppose says general surgery, you must have at least 6 general surgeons of different interests, colorectal interest, hepatobiliary interest, or whatever. So different interests, you must have enough of the department. So we found suddenly we had only about 3 or 4 of such hospitals. So what happened to train the master's program? We were able to take only very
have we lost you?
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear now? Why did you lose?
Yeah, the line is just breaking up a bit. Yeah,
okay.
don't worry, carry on.
Yeah, sure. So what has happened is, when we started a master's program, we could not produce enough doctors to specialize because we did not have the number of specialists and the resources to train them. So what has happened was, every year we were able to produce 3 or 4 general surgeons or 3 or 4 orthopedic surgeons and so on and so forth, and it was not adequate. So now what has happened, the government said, please go to USA or UK or whatever it is, do your specialty and come. You will be regarded as par with the master's program as well. So we have a mainstream program, the masters, as well as the alternate program. They recognize that is equally for promotion, salary, and whatnot. Okay, and it's not a must that you must do it in Malaysia. Yeah, you can do it in any part of the world. Suppose you can start off your specialty career. Okay, most of the specialties we got the part 1, 2 kind of exam. And like for example, you want to go to USA to do a specialty, you can take your part 1 as in the midway of your MBBS course itself. Part 2, as soon as you finish your MBBS, even before you become a houseman, you can sit for your part 2. And if you pass that, you can even start working in USA and do a specialty in USA. You want to stay there or you want to come back, it's up to you. Okay, so it's not that you have to go through the Ministry of the health system in Malaysia alone.
Okay, but having said that, Prof, embarking on a specialization, it is effectively obtaining a job role in that area whilst studying for the relevant examinations, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, there is no college where you pay fees and then you have what do you call 7 to 5 o'clock classes. No such thing. You are doing a normal work and you are earning a salary like any other doctor. Okay, but what you are doing the surgeries and so on under some supervision. Okay, then you are given more and more responsibilities, and you do more and more surgeries or management of a patient if you're a non-surgeon. And then at the end of 2 years exposure, you will sit for an exam, final exam. Okay, and if you pass it, then they regard you as a specialist in that field. So it is not a separate course. This is on the job learning, okay, for which you are paid, and you don't pay anybody. Okay, because you are providing a service as you are learning, and you are sitting for the exam.
Right. So basically, it's not something that parents should worry about, because a lot of parents are thinking that if I have to pay for the MBBS education, and then if my child wants to become a specialist, it's the numbers are going to rack up in terms of the cost.
No, see, when I joined University of Malaya, okay, I took the external exams at that time. There were no master's program, and as I was earning the money, I was supporting my family. I was supporting my parents and my brothers and sisters. And at the same time, I wrote, I sat for the exams and I passed. Okay. So in fact, after the MBBS, while they are working, okay, they should be able to even help out the family, not only themselves, the family, and at the same time take up a specialty exam as well. Yeah.
Okay. Now, coming back to the issue of cost, Prof, you've been in both a private medical institution and as well as a public medical institution. Is there really a difference between the two, for a student, apart from the cost factor?
As for education, you mean? Are you
Yeah,
talking about
the
education?
study
Yes, yes,
experience, the
yeah.
curriculum.
Okay. We have about 32 medical schools in Malaysia. Every medical school has got a different curriculum. Even the public universities, whether it is a UKM, USM, UPM, all these have a different curriculum. But the subject they study and the learning outcome at the end of the subject is the same in every university. Okay, including Manipal. There's no difference at all. So whether University of Malaya, the learning outcome at the end of the program, what the students should know, okay, and what they should be proficient at, is the same in the University of Malaya or is in IMU or it is in Malacca, Manipal. The difference is how we deliver the program is why it would matter. Okay, like Malacca Manipal, I can talk for that. We are very innovative. We get experienced kind of people. We know what are the difficulties the students are facing. We don't have students are facing and how to overcome those difficulties that the students may have. Okay, and so on and so forth. And we is easier in a private institution to tailor and alter the way that we teach, okay, so that we can educate the students in the learning is much easier and faster. The only difference in public university is that they have to get clearance through the university, which are non-medical, part of the universities and vice chancellors and so on. They have to get a clearance for any, even a small change and so on. But all of us under supervision of NQA, this qualification agency which accredit them, and we're glad to say the maximum accreditation they can give to any college is 5 years, and if you are not up to the mark, they won't give you more than a year. Okay, there have been instances where they're given 6 months as well. Malacca has got a distinction of getting 5-year accreditation every time. Consecutively, we are getting the 5 years accreditation, which is that's something that you all have to look forward when the students choosing a college. Okay, whether it's they go through pages and pages of requirements and so on and so forth. Okay, before they can give such an accreditation.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So it's basically, the apart from the cost, the distinctive factor would be how quickly each institution can get up to speed. Say, for example, like right now, classes are not happening. It's got to move online. How quickly the institution can react to continue to teach their students, and this is a challenge with some institutions because of the sheer size of them, and in the case of smaller institutions or highly specialized institutions like Malacca Manipal, we're able to move very quickly. Is that right?
Yes, yes. This deficiency was came apparent with the COVID. On the day they declared MCO, okay, we not go and the students had to go back. On the same day, we started online classes. Then about a week later, I think we started. I think in the week we had 4 days or 5 days of classes because in between there was a Saturday and Sunday. What happened was there was a directive telling that don't start the online classes as yet. Okay, and then what we private colleges we did was we made a representation telling that we have got our resources to run the program online. We have got the lecturers who are very familiar quite familiar. There are few things which we did learn, but most of us also knew some aspects of online learning, and we made the representation through the Association of Private Colleges and Universities, and they agreed, okay, you can start. When there was a gap was about a week where we did not have a class because by the directive. When they say start, the same day we started the classes. If you
Right.
compare that to University of Malaya, they just started after 1.5 months, okay, because they didn't have these kind of facilities. And to be fair to them, some of the students from the University of Malaya, I think they came from a rural background. They may not have the computer or whatever to do it, so they have to sort of pre-record some of the lessons, and I think they wanted to do that, and that was the reason. So we were able to adapt by a number of hours, okay, to do that, because we believe that learning should not be stopped at all. Learning is a very continuous process, and if we don't study for a number of days, you're out of the subject, you can forget a lot of things, and you should be continuously, you should be refreshing and so on. And as a private institution, we're able to do that. Having said that, not all private institutions also did start the online in time. Now all of them have started, but
Yeah.
we were the first, and in fact, some of the very well-known private universities did ask our advice on how we started, how we are doing the program, and so on. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Prof, a number of questions have come in, and I'm just going to select a few here. Our young men and women are worried. You know, there's been a lot of negative publicity about housemanships, putting 5 years of their time doing an MBBS and coming out and not being able to get a job. You know, so what's your take on that? You know, firstly, is there any truth in doctors still being unemployed these days? And if when they go into the housemanship, what are some of the challenges that they should be mentally prepared to, you know, undergo in that 2 years of housemanship?
Okay, this is a very genuine question that
Yes.
we address. There are two things here happening. Number one is that our budget for health expenditure had been always on the lower side. Okay, and we have had a lot of discussions with the then DG and the present DG, Norashim also. We have had a lot of talks as to what has happened. What has happened was, in Malaysia, you pay 50 cents those days, and you can have a surgery, cardiothoracic surgery, done. Okay, there's a lot of expenditure. It doesn't happen in any other country. They have to come up with some money. And what happened at that time, we didn't have much of insurance as well. So at the same time, slowly there was a mushrooming of private hospitals. So private hospitals were able to manage all these patients who had insurance and or well off and they can afford. Then what they said, what the ministry said, why we don't have much budget, okay, let them go to the private and so on. So we did not build many hospitals after the Britishers left. Okay, we only improved the number of hospitals by 20 to 30% after the British have left. Okay, which is very pathetic. We should have been many times, a few hundred times actually, but it didn't happen because they didn't have the budget allocation at that time. And because of not enough hospitals and not enough hospitals with specialities, only you must have a specialty hospital with a certain number of specialists in each department. Only then that hospital can be considered for a houseman post. And there should be a ratio between the number of specialists in the hospital and the houseman. So they cannot simply raise the number of housemen in any hospital. So we cannot simply take because they don't have enough specialists to run. The specialist ratio cannot be kept. That was one reason why you got a problem. Then they realized that at one time what has happened was housemen in all over the world is 1 year 1 year training program, houseman training.
But now it's 2 years in
Yeah.
Malaysia, correct?
Why it happened? It happened because we were that time very short of house officers and junior doctors. So the easiest way to make the house officers to stay to have the pool of house officers is to increase the housemanship to 2 years. When they increase the housemanship to 2 years, normally a houseman after 1 year they would have gone become a medical officer. But here they didn't vacate the houseman post. They didn't go become a medical officer. They stayed on. When they stayed on, then they realized, okay, there's a backlog of houseman who was supposed to join. That was the issue that happened about 1.5 to 2 years back. And there was waiting list was almost a year, which is very unacceptable. But now it is about 4 or 5 months, I think. They have reduced it. They are increasing the hospitals. There are 12 tertiary hospitals are being built at the moment. And just before the pre-COVID, the DG had assured us that by that time, and 6 7 months, the waiting list should be less than 3 months. Okay, that's number one. Number two, medical profession is the only profession where the government guarantees you a job. If you become an engineer, there is nobody gives you a job. Okay, you have to find your own job. You become a lawyer, you become any other profession, no. But here, what happened in medical profession is the only profession they have to give you a job, houseman. The only thing was the waiting period was there. So you must compare to the other professions, the other courses. There is no such thing as they are going to give you a job. You may be unemployed for years. Okay, or you may do something else not related to your specialty. You may do farming or whatever, okay, rather than doing because they waited so long. That's number one. Number two is we have a compulsory service because if we really look, the hospitals are really short. So even you finish housemanship, which have increased to 2 years to cope up with the shortage of manpower, in addition to that, they have a 2 year compulsory medical officers post. Okay, also to make sure that the pool of the junior doctors are there. Otherwise, there'll be the health system in Malaysia, public health system will collapse. So don't have to worry about no job. There was a hiccup because the planning was not done properly.
Yeah, but now it's all being sorted.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, Prof. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
It's been very insightful. If you could stay on, we might take a few more questions towards the end. But
Sure.
very briefly, for all those listening in today, Prof. Nachi is with Malacca Manipal as our clinical director, as well as head of surgery. Our MBBS is one of 3 programs available at Malacca Manipal. We offer a foundation in science for post-SPM students, of course, our flagship program, the MBBS, and a Bachelor's of Dental Surgery. All these programs, we have the intakes coming up, foundation in August, MBBS and BDS in September. And I think, it'd be interesting for students to note that Malacca Manipal has a unique way of structuring our clinical experience in the sense that semester 10, all students who have passed their exams in semester 9, which is basically all the written exams, would undergo what we call shadow housemanship. And as Prof. Nachi said, housemanship, the opportunity is there, but it's a job. By doing this shadow housemanship in semester 10, we're giving you a glimpse of what is required when you actually embark on your housemanship, which will give you confidence because ask your parents, in terms of a job, what bosses basically look for is your skills, your aptitude, and your experience and exposure. So Malacca Manipal's MBBS shadow housemanship gives you almost a edge over your peers as you embark on your housemanship and your medical career. Okay, we are housed in Malacca, and hopefully by October, our MBBS and BDS program would be completely held in Malacca once we obtain our university college status. Hostel is provided, all single rooms with attached bathroom and air condition. And we're very vibrant college, and Prof. Nachi would attest to that. He's continuously getting invites to a lot of social programs organized by the students to be judges in various competitions, so on and so forth. Correct, Prof?
Yes, yes. Including international competitions, we do very well.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Okay, and where everything is on campus, sports complex and things like that. For those who are interested, these are our admission requirements. If you're presenting for the MBBS and BDS, it's a minimum of 3 Bs. The core subjects would be biology and chemistry. Your third subject can be math or physics. Our application is fully online. We will give you details on how to get in touch with us if you want to proceed with an application after this, or if you need to speak further with one of our counselors. Okay, scholarships are available at both foundation and MBBS stage. It's of course a lot more competitive in terms of our MBBS and BDS scholarship. These are some of our scholars for this year. A college scholar receives a 50% tuition fee scholarship. Academic scholars 50,000, merit scholars 10,000, and special awards it's 100,000. And if your family is a recipient of Bantuan Sara Hidup, do get in touch with us so we can tell you more about our special awards. Right. So, Prof, a couple of last questions. Everyone is very, very fascinated with your experience and knowledge. If you could name 5 areas of specialization that would be very, very viable in the next decade, what would they be?
The what has happened, the scenarios always change. For example, we thought that there was one time a lot of physicians were specializing only on infectious diseases. Okay, then what has happened was people were not dying of plague, not on cholera, typhoid, and so on, and people have sort of did not look into that specialty. But now what has happened in the last decade, we have got a number of SARS type of infection, COVID infections, MERS infection, and so on. So this cycle have now brought out that we cannot afford to slacken in any of the specialities. In fact, every specialty has got its own merit and demand. And if you are looking at it in Malaysia, every specialty is short. Even an accident emergency, traumatology specialist. I think you're aware that we need 900 people. We only got about 12 people. Okay.
Trauma specialist.
So, trauma specialist. Okay, pure trauma specialist. One of the head used to be the head of department of the University of Malaya Traumatology was from Malacca Manipal. Okay, he was head of department at the time. So the thing is, so we do not have. So what has happened? A normal doctor or a medical officer is acting as if he's a trauma specialist, which he is not. Okay, because we do not have trauma specialists at all. So many. So every field there's a short. So I cannot tell because if one of the fields of specialization it was a surplus, then I say don't do that. There are too many people. Okay, but obstetrics and gynecology, from pediatrics specialties, cardiothoracic specialties, and so on. The only thing I can tell you is that our demographic, what is going to happen. At least 10 years back, our older age group at 65 years and above was 4%. Today is 5.7%. Okay, in 10 years time, they are going to 9 to 12%. So our population is aging. So if we are talking about geriatric age related diseases and problems, it is going to be massive. And we are one of the worst in case of geriatric practice. Geriatric means managing people with the older age group. Okay, and the whole demographic is changing in the sense that there are going to be demand for geriatric practice. Number one. Number two, having said whatever, the Malaysians got a very unhealthy lifestyle. Okay, we try not to exercise. We will overeat. And we are not so much bothered about control in our food and lifestyle. We have a lot of excesses and so on. It's going to take very long time to become normalcy. So what we call is NCDs. NCDs means non-communicable diseases. That is the high blood pressure, diabetes, and so on. Both will cause kidney problem. Both will cause heart problems. Okay, heart attack. Both will cause the strokes and so on. So they are going to be there all the time. Okay. So in fact, every specialty needs specialists.
Okay. So in terms of a student choosing, should they follow their interest? I mean, should they look at what they're interested in, or should they look at where their best scores was during
Yeah,
yes.
we are lucky in the sense that we are short in every specialty. So now we are at the liberty to choose what interests you. If we choose a field which you have interest, then your work becomes a leisure. Okay, you will enjoy every moment you are doing that kind of work. Okay, so choose what is calling. There are some people who don't want to see patients in touch. They want to stay in the room and then manage. They can become radiologists, for example, pathologists, okay, immunologists, allergists, and so on. There are people who want to go every day and be in touch with the patient. They want to love communication, want to talk to them, and so on. Then you become some sort of physicians and so on. You love children. Pediatrics is fantastic. Okay, you like children and you like surgery. Then you become a pediatric surgeon. There are so many things. Or you want to impart knowledge to others. You become a teacher. Okay, or you like to administration skills. You become a director of a hospital. Okay, you like regimental kind of things. Join the army hospital. Okay, there are so or you like to do a lot of research. Do a research, join a research facility. So it's not just hospital. It's not just the one place you practice. So there are so many opportunities are there, and sky is the limit.
Okay. One pressing question seems to have come in from a lot of our attendees. In your opinion, what are some of the key qualities that a student should possess if they are thinking of going into medicine?
Okay, number one, you should be altruistic. That is to say, you should feel for the patient illness. Somebody comes in, you should be able to feel that this person who had been most likely healthy, now it has come to this kind of, you must have, the heart must be there. Okay, I always think this is the only profession you need your heart as much as your brain. Okay, the head is as also important. The knowledge is there, but the heart must be there. You should be willing to sacrifice. Okay, if they are going to call you at 1 o'clock in the morning for something and you're posted to be on call, I think you cannot say, oh yeah, I can't go. No, you should be willing to go. I said, well, I'm going to help somebody. So somebody is in need, somebody is in trouble. If I don't go, something will happen. So what happens? There must be a call in you to take up the challenge and then go. I want to do it. Okay, and you feel a satisfaction that you got up at 1 o'clock or 2 a.m. Went and saved somebody, helped somebody. That kind of satisfaction, it is fantastic, and you must have that kind of feeling. That's number one. Number two is that they must MBBS is a program where you have to study, okay, regularly. Okay, you cannot say that I will do it 1 month before the exams and so on. It doesn't work. Okay, I think you have to do maybe out of 7 days a week, 6 days a week, at least 2 hours a day, you must go through, okay, your lessons and so on. And I think it's a very rewarding emotionally, spiritually, and also financially, a career in medicine.
Right. Often than not, some people think that, yeah, I want to help people and stuff like that. I have to be a doctor. And then perhaps because of financial or availability or access to study, they go, oh, maybe I should be a nurse or a pharmacist. What would you say to those in those positions?
Okay, see, we have, in fact, the frontliners that you're seeing now in this COVID outbreak, they're all nurses. Okay, Doctors, they do the rounds in the morning with all the gear. They're wearing that personal protective equipment and so on. They do their rounds. They will come out and so on. But the people who are caring for them all the time, they wear their PPE for 18 hours, 20 hours. Okay, they can't go to the bathroom, they can't eat, or can't drink, and so on. They're all nursing personnel. With due respect to all of them, in fact, every one of us at some time or other would have come into touch. Some nurses would have cared for us and so on. I have plenty of respect and so on. Yes, not all of us are intellectually bright, not able to score the marks and so on. I think nursing profession is a good profession, okay, if you can't go in. But if you think that you want to do more, okay, you want to do more, please do your SPMs. There are some people who don't get all the Bs, but the people are persistent. No, I wanted to do. So what has happened is that they will take the subjects where they got a C, for example, they upgrade, okay, to get a B, okay. Some of them I know who have joined the foundation, the 1C, but towards the end of the foundation, maybe in the chemistry they got a C. They took separately a chemistry paper in SPM, they passed and so on. And surprisingly, because of the interest, they did extremely well. Okay, very well. In fact, better than some of the good scorers. So it is a lot of the interest and the persistence are important. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's all we have time for today. Thank you very much once again, Prof. Nachi, as well as to all our viewers. We do apologize that we were not able to, answer all the questions that have come in on the chat. We will try to address them in our next session. Do follow us on our Facebook page, Triple MC Malaysia. We will try and post all that. And if you're thinking of doing an MBBS, we hope that you would seriously consider joining us at Malacca Manipal, one of Malaysia's oldest and most established private and medical and dental college. So we encourage you to have a serious conversation with your parents today. Prof. Nachi has most certainly given you many, many things to think about if you're considering an MBBS as your degree and a career in medicine. And we'll close with the words of Carl Jung: medicine cures diseases, but only doctors cure patients. We wish you all the best in your undergraduate journey, and we hope to see you sometime soon on campus. Thank you so much, Prof. Nachi. Have a great
Okay.
evening, everybody.
Welcome. Thank you.